Okay, welcome to episode 14 of the Operators Pod. We got the whole crew together. This episode is going to be a little different. Instead of going on a bunch of different topics, we're going to focus on culture. So hiring, retention. We're going to go a little all over the place, right? I'll warn you now, this is a massive topic. We probably need to do multiple episodes just on team stuff because you can zoom way out and talk about vision and values, and you can go super tactical and just talk about meeting rhythms or what do you do when you fire somebody. So this episode, all about culture. As usual, huge thanks to Northbeam, SendLane, and Fulfill. These are our sponsors for this show. Let's dig in.
It all started with a rumor, a whisper about a private WhatsApp chat where 9-figure entrepreneurs swapped insights, information, and deals behind closed doors. And now, for the first time ever, these operators are pulling back the curtain on their clandestine world right here on this podcast. You're about to witness something truly remarkable. A glimpse into the minds and businesses of the world's most successful operators. So sit back, relax, and stay glued to your headphones. The chat is about to begin.
Sean, why don't you kick us off? Because this is sort of you started this chat. So take it away and then we'll all kind of run with it.
Yeah. So I asked for some help. We're hiring a COO. First time we ever had a COO in this business. I guess I briefly held the title, but I didn't know what I was doing. So, look, Ridges, fast growing, 9 figures, privately held, but we want to bring somebody in. I've described them as not having gray hair, but hair that could turn gray. Someone who could join the business and professionalize it, get us ready for whatever the next, outcome would be. If it's being privately held and scaling this thing up, or a transaction, or private equity or whatever. I just need somebody who's been around 9-figure businesses before and is ready to jump in and eventually replace me, right? That was the whole pitch. It's look, come in, work with me for 2 years. Let's get this business where I think it can go. And then I get to retire and you get to run this business, right? That's what I'm really looking for. And my question to the group was, how do you find them? What do you pay them? Have you guys hired a strong outside executive, right? And has it been a disaster? Has it been good? And then we could just broadly speak about what do you do as a CEO to shape culture inside your business? So who's got some COO tips for me? Mike, you want to start?
Well, the way that we built the company was pretty atypical. Usually what it is it's you've got kind of your founder or your founders, and then they get something with some traction, and then they just kind of hire whoever they can, right? It's usually beginning of career people, and then you get to some scale and they feel I can bring in somebody. Because of a number of different factors, where I was in my career, my network, different things, and how quickly we got to major traction. Because in our first year, we kind of went from nothing to a $10 million revenue run rate or something. I just went out and hired who I thought those people were at Go. People that were experienced and could come in and be executive level contributors. So our CFO had been a controller for an international oil and gas company. He was in consulting when I recruited him, but he's probably 3 or 4 years older than me. So he's kind of in his mid 40s, and he's fantastic. But I had the benefit of going and getting him at the very beginning, and that was awesome. So I don't have a lot of recruitment tips because my recruitment strategy has been I want to know people and have that I have personal trust with them. I mean, we could do a whole section of talking about trust, but McKinsey would say that trust is actually the number one thing in high performing teams. If you've got a culture of trust. Agree. And so for me, it's well, listen, I don't care how competent you are. Trust takes time. It takes relationship. It takes me understanding what you're about. So I went and got people, our initial group of people, the first 15 or so hires, all but one of them I'd known for 10 years or more. Every single one of the guys that's an executive at our company, I've known for more than a decade. So I'm a terrible proxy here, other than it's obviously worked, that taking the mindset of I'm going to hire executives early, I'm going to bet on the company, I'm going to bet on growth, and I'm going to hire people that I have a really high level of trust with.
So I want to jump in here, if you guys don't mind. So I've got Sean, we have a COO. I think I've talked about him before. His name's Jeff. And Jeff, for all intents, like sort of runs the day-to-day of the business. I spend most of my time on like product and marketing strat, like where is the business going? So like I'm way out in the future most of the time. And then like my zoom in where I spend like day-to-day stuff is probably in like, growth marketing stuff, just because I've got so many damn reps there. Right. I'm the equivalent of our Connor, Sean. Like, so that's how I split my time. But I want to talk about the trust thing, because I think that's really important. And if you can't do what Mike did, this is where this gets tricky. Like when you're hiring a COO, right? Or like any kind of C-suite in a business, you have to decide right away how you're going to think about trusting this person. So, and this will go top down now, right? And this is very much a cultural thing. And trust absolutely is the most important ingredient in any high performance team. Like you can KPI and SOP your way until you're bloody, like your fingers are bleeding. But if you don't have trust, there's no sustainable performance in a business. That's like, at least in my experience. So I've got like my view. I don't know if you guys ever heard Toby Luque talk about the trust battery. Did you ever hear this concept? Right. So it's like every single person that starts in our business, you have a choice, right? I choose to say that when a person starts, their battery, think of like batteries full of energy. Trust is the actual electricity. Their battery is mostly full when they start. Like I'm an optimist, but we have to trust that, again, with trust that the hiring process and the people that put the reps into bringing this person on weren't idiots, and that we hired a very competent person. Okay. Now, every interaction that you have with each person in your company, leadership on downward, either fills the battery up or depletes it. You're either building trust or eroding trust, and trust takes time. It's easier if you have a robust hiring process to start people off near full trust, because then that's where like, you hear bullshit bingo terms like empowerment, right? When it comes to leadership, like that comes from trust. And then trust is typically built from like empathy and humility, right? And like a lot of people are like, no, vulnerability is the fastest path to trust. I just think that being empathetic and humble is what you're going to get. But Sean, I think when you hire this person, the biggest challenge you're going to have, and I see this with every founder, every entrepreneur, is that when you hire somebody of that level, right, you're used to doing this work. And now you're going to have to trust this person to do the work that you're used to doing. And it's not tactical work, right? Like these C-suite people are it's a lot less like button pushing type work, which is super easy to measure. Like it's so easy to hire a fucking media buyer and know if they're doing a good job.
Let me jump in on this.
CEO, like, how do you know?
Let me jump in on this.
Go ahead, Jason.
Sean, so if I were in your shoes and I were going to hire a senior person, I would absolutely get a top level recruiter and I would pay them. It's too important of a position. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy to find that person because you're looking for a special animal, right? This is your type of business. It's there's an age bracket, right? Like you're not going to hire. There's very few 50-plus-year-olds that are going to come in and be the COO of a company like Ridge because there's just too much D2C. It's too fast moving. But I would absolutely hire a top end recruiter. It's too important. And in terms of recruiting in general, what we found is that with the elevation of our brand and the visibility of our brand in the market, that we have access to incredible talent. There are incredible people at like the director level and the VP level. I can just like, it's amazing that we hired a great head of retention recently. We've got a great affiliate person. We've got great people in marketing now. Like a year and a half ago, I was like, how can I find good people? And I couldn't. And the brand just visibility just brought them in. at the C level, it's going to be different, but I think you have to go through a bunch of different candidates, get a real recruiter on the case. Maybe you're doing that already, but that's what I would do.
And Sean, I would say that your comp, I think, I'm not going to say it because it was in our private chat, but like, I think you're probably low. Like if you want somebody who can take your job, think about like, what would you do? So like if you were in the open market, you didn't own Ridge and you weren't going to go start another thing. And somebody was like, Sean, I want you to come in and run this company for me. Like what would you need to take that gig?
Right. $40 million.
That quality of person. What's that, Sean?
I said $40 million.
$40 million. Yeah. Well, okay. So like maybe step it down from that. Maybe.
But so Matt, how did you get Jeff? Right. So Mike recruited from his personal network of 10 years of friendship and building or whatever.
Yep.
I'm trying to hire outside my network on this one. I actually want someone I've never met, a totally different hire brought in. So Matt, how did you get Jeff?
So I had met him. So he was running a venture fund and he had run a bunch of companies prior to that. And then I had met him, through somebody else that I knew. Like we were in market looking for a COO. Like we knew we needed a good, like right hand for me, just like a good operator. So we were in market looking. What Jason said, like hire a recruiter. We did that. And then ultimately this guy, we ended up having a chat with him and just asked him flat out, like, would you ever be interested in going and operating again? Cause he has gray hair, right? He's the oldest person in our company for sure. Probably, I think he's a good 15 years older than I am. So he's in his late 50s.
He's in his 90s.
No, yeah, right. Thanks, man. I'm still in the graying camp. I'm not fully gray yet. But yeah, so I think it was through network, which is, it's always the best hire is like somebody you know through somebody. So it wasn't somebody I knew directly at the time, right? This was like a brand new relationship. But we had hired a recruiter. We looked at all kinds of people. Like I don't make any senior hire unless I have at least like 3 final candidates. Like I can't. And they're too important of a role. And they can be like, we fucked up C-level recruits in the past in this company in my last one. And you know, the damage they do is like really hard to unwind. It takes
super high risk.
It's really nice when the people are there for you behind the company. Like Northbeam's been that way for us big time from the beginning. Some of the Northbeam functionality actually, some of the things they've built have been just out of conversations my team has had with them and requests, like thinking about things like conversion lag. They built a lot of stuff into their system, just, you know, going back and forth with us and back and forth with Ridge. Those are the type of vendors that you want to work with.
Let's talk about comp. I'll just say it, right? So what I was thinking was $300,000 as a base salary plus some amount of bonus, and then like some percentage of the company on the table, right? So we've never given out shares, right? We do like a profits interest type thing. Like, you know, Jason's familiar with it. If you ever bring a celebrity on board, you typically have to give them profits interest because they don't want to pay taxes on being given shares or whatever. And like, we don't have like an options program or whatever else. Right. So like, that's what we were basically thinking. And selfishly, I wanted this person to basically be like a VP level at a mid 9-figure brand, right? So like not an established COO, because I want them to work with me for 2 years so that they can understand what I want done. I can shape them into, you know, like my perfect vision of this. And then, you know, they could be, you know, get them ready to take over and run this business. So I'm really looking for like a protege there. Right. So Jason, I want to go to you. When you're hiring these senior level people, how off the mark on comp am I? $300K for someone. What are your thoughts there?
For a COO, at a business of your size, I think you're off by about 25% on base. I think it's got to be close to 400, and equity and bonus.
Okay, cool. So I'm not the craziest. And then so we're working with a recruiter right now, right? And Matt, you brought up an interesting thing, taking someone from VC, right? Starting to look at like just different types of people, maybe consultants, maybe people from the venture capital world or whatever, like just very top tier operators. Inside of Facebook, like when I go to Facebook events, the thing that blows me away is that all the people that work at Facebook are so buttoned up, like just way more buttoned up than us, basically. Like they all come from like the best schools. They have like a huge degree of empathy. Like they speak clearly and with intention. And I wouldn't describe myself as that. So
they all
maybe
used to work at McKinsey or Bain.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe I should start recruiting those type of people. Right now, I'm just looking at the outdoor industry, right? Trying to take somebody from the big outdoor players. But Mike, do you have something you want to jump in?
Well, I was just going to say that, like, I think one of the things that really trips people up is that when you make a hire like this, you want to be able to like quickly explain it to people where they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That seems like a good hire. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through credentials. And so that's either where they went to school and got an MBA or what companies they worked at. But I think that's generally a pretty ineffective way to think about it. I mean, to the point that it might even be, in some situations, a negative signal. And we've talked about this. Like, it really depends on what you're trying to do and what your goals are. And are you trying to be a company that's going to go public, that's going to get acquired? Are you wanting to bring somebody in that's going to be able to continue to fuel growth? But for sure, one of the kind of diseases that people can get with a company as it starts to grow is thinking, I'm going to make an executive hire that kind of shows I'm one of the big boys now. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hire somebody that you know, as an executive that worked at public company X or whatever, that has these obvious credentials, that they went to McKinsey or they were a Harvard MBA or you know, whatever. And those are not helpful, basically. Like, it's easy to want to fall back on those things, but they're generally not helpful. And what makes it tough, especially, is the very best people are never looking for a job. The very best people have to be convinced and pried out of a good situation by an even better situation. So my perspective is, you got to start with, what is it that I want this role to do? And I'm really making sure I'm hiring somebody for that and not just somebody that sounds good or looks good on paper. Number two, what is it that I can offer in addition to compensation? I've talked about this before, but like, compensation is very holistic. And if all you're doing is competing on money, you know, here's your annual comp, here's your stock, then you don't necessarily have any kind of particular edge in going and getting somebody great. So the edges in getting somebody great are when you can offer something in compensation that other people can't. So sometimes that's, hey, they really want to work on a particular mission, or we've got more flexibility than they currently have in their job, or they've always really wanted to live here, or whatever. Another type of kind of advantage that you can have is you can offer them the ability to do something that they've wanted to do, but they haven't done previously. But like, again, there's risk with that. So anyway, like, I'm constantly thinking about, okay, what are the unique advantages that we can offer to somebody where we can kind of punch above our weight and we can go get somebody. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time concerned about, hey, does this make sense to people outside? Just a quick example from the last year, got to know the guy who was literally the head of consumer packaged goods for McKinsey. Like, McKinsey worldwide, like, this guy ran it, and he was looking to make a transition, and he really wanted, he and his family were very open, I'd say, to potentially coming back to Oklahoma because his wife was from here. And when I talked to him, he's wicked smart. But when it came to his compensation expectations, I wasn't sure that there was a fit. But the bigger issue I ran into was that if I tried to bring him into our culture, even though he was unbelievable, I would have created more friction than help, because I've got a lot of other young, talented leaders that I would be covering up. And so I could offer like 50 or 60% of what this guy wanted, but not everything. And I also didn't have like a unique kind of angle where it's like, okay, this hire really makes sense, even though you're really talented. So, I mean, that's kind of my advice, is that first you've got to really say, all right, what is it exactly this person is going to do, and what are my unique things I can bring to the table other than just money that are going to make this super compelling, where somebody who's entrenched in a job that they're really happy might be willing to move to come and work at
It's
Ridge.
all about the opportunity. It's
Mike,
all about
that's
the
really-
opportunity. Like Ridge is an exciting opportunity. The recruiters need to get people excited. I have a recruiter who works for me for mid-level positions, and he's no problem finding anyone for anything. And it's because it's an exciting opportunity. It's like have a seat on the rocket ship. Like Ridge is an incredible business with an incredible team. And I would imagine that you would probably have a long list of really good people right now. If not, you should fire your recruiter, get a new one. I was in Vegas last week at a Shark Tank reunion. For some reason, I thought it might be a good idea to go speak at this thing. I was like, I haven't been to Vegas in a while. Why don't I go? Turned out that I'll spend the night, I'll go to one of Gordon's restaurants. It'll be fun. Meanwhile, wound up like, oops, this is Prime Day. I don't really have time for this, so I'm just going to fly in and out. And I dragged Danny with me. And we had a lot of fun, though. But I saw Jimmy from Senlane there. And, I just love the enthusiasm that he brings. And he's just like sitting at their booth, just cranking on his laptop, talking to people, flipping back and forth, like just so genuine and genuinely wanting to help. It's really cool. And I understand that he's gotten some really good leads already just from sponsoring the pod. So I'm really, really happy that they signed on. And I really think they have a huge opportunity to be a disruptor in the space. So I think everyone should really give Senlane a hard look, not just because of the product, but because of the people.
But Mike, you brought up a good point about saying no to an executive to protect the culture. Jason, I know culture is really important to you. So let's kind of hear about what HexCloud culture is on a day-to-day and what you do to protect it.
Actually, it's crazy because, we've added so many people this year. We actually were an incredibly lean team, reliant on a lot of agencies on the marketing side for like since I arrived at HexCloud in early 2020. And culture is driven from the top. Culture is driven from the founders and from the leaders. And, our culture has always been kind of like very playful. Just Danny and Cole are both hysterical, and they're both, they moved to LA to be in the entertainment business. So like every meeting used to start off with bits. There's always a bit. And it's just, we love to laugh, and sometimes we push the envelope a little bit on, maybe our jokes could be slightly more PC, but we kind of like people that get indoctrinated into the HexCloud culture. They just know that we don't take things too seriously. We take the work very seriously, but we're also like serious about being relaxed. I've always been the type of manager who treats subordinates well, almost like friends. Like I'm very open and friendly with the people who work on the team. Sometimes that's actually a bad thing because where do you draw the line? But you just can't help your own personality. But our culture always, it's like two things. It's like it needs to be entertaining. I think when work is entertaining, it's just that much better. And we're always trying to make each other laugh. I'm the worst at it. Danny and Cole are very funny. Working on my game there. And the other thing is trying to maintain a results-oriented culture. And that is really interesting, and it dovetails well to Sean wanting a COO and where should that COO come from. And you want to improve your management of your business. You want to maintain the things that have driven you to success, and then figure out the things that you could improve on. And being a results-oriented culture at our business is for me first and foremost, because I'm about execution. I was an M&A lawyer. I was an M&A banker. I had my very first senior mentor at Skadden. Every time I walked out of his office, he would be mumbling, "Just get it done, Jason. Just get it done." Like I'd never forget Mark Knopf from Minneapolis. And probably will never hear this, but this was in 1997. "Just get it done, Jason. Just get it done." Like I'm always thinking that in my head, and it's really worked for me. But I do worry as we've added people, like the layers of meetings. I just gave a speech at one of our internal meetings. Like there were too many people showing up to a meeting with a third party. And I'm like, guys, do you know how this looks? They send one person and you send 3 or 4 people to this meeting. What are we, fucking desperate? Like, this is a bad look. And that's just like a microcosm of like this meeting culture, wanting to include everyone. It's like I started using Slack like right when it came out in our boutique investment banking firm for that reason. It's like and the term async now is like a big deal. I started propped up about a year ago. I'm actually not very good at it. I love like when people drop by my office. And actually, that's the other thing I say. And I tweeted this the other day because something about it was pissing me off. It was like, if you're not a fully remote company like Ridge, if you want to be a player, you need to show up at the office somewhat. Not every day, could be 2 days a week, could be 3 days a week. But like the people who are going to get outsized pay and outsized performance. Like when I sold a company to FactSet, which is a big New York Stock Exchange listed tech company in the fintech space, and I was the CFO of this company. We sold it for like $80 million back in 2004. And they said, "All right, Jason, we want to hire you. What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, first of all, you guys are really shitty at doing deals, so you should hire me as your corporate development." And they did. And then they said, "All right, well, where do you want to work? We have a satellite office in New York, or the HQ is in Fairfield County, Connecticut." And I said, "I'm moving to Connecticut. I'm out." Like I was in New Jersey. I had to move, 100 miles, sell my house, move my business. I moved my family because I wanted to be where the decision makers were. But that's just a tangent. Going back to this cultural thing, it's, how do we preserve our results-oriented culture? And I'll be honest with you, I'm struggling with this a little bit right now. I mean, our results are ridiculous, so it's like, what am I complaining about? And that's why it's not that big of a deal. But too many people in too many meetings, too many people showing up to meetings with vendors, and like not enough deep work getting done. And I think this is probably an area where I could learn a bunch from Ridge, because I think being fully remote, you have to be much more efficient on a lot of things. And there's the operational efficiencies, and but it does start with like your philosophy and your culture.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I love being remote, but if I had an office, I would live in it. That's like the challenging part, where like just thinking about like how I would like to work is like, oh no, all the food I like would be there. All the drinks I like would be there. Like I would have a walking treadmill. I'd have a couch I could take a nap on, and I'd probably be in my office for 14 hours a day. Right. And so like I get to do all that stuff being remote, and people just don't get to bug me, which I really enjoy. Jason, I guess my tip for you with like the vendor conversation is just hire a VA to be on all of those meetings by themselves. Like we have a project manager, Sophia, who's based in, South America, and she beats the shit out of vendors. So like we're not even on calls with vendors. Sophia's on calls with vendors being like, why is it that much? Like, why is that the price? And then she gives us, a scorecard or a summary at the end of it. Like, hey, this is what that vendor said. This is what they do, whatever. Right. And immediately free up 8 hours.
So we had a
week with all
massive
of your team
celebrity
members.
reach out to us recently about partnering, and 3 of my people showed up to the call with this celebrity's manager. I mean, I wish I had a shotgun, because I would have blown people to bits. Like, are you kidding? You know, it's like, how do you not know that? That's what drove me nuts.
Yeah, imagine if you just had one VA.
Jason, do you use the Bezos, like the 2 pizza rule for meetings? Like if you can't feed a meeting with 2 pizzas,
I just think there's too many calls and meetings with like 4 or 5 people on it. I think there should be like 2 people, and then someone should take notes, and the notes should be there. I mean, there's a lot of these like people using Notion and all these other things now. I'm curious, you know, a lot of people recording meetings now. We are still a little bit old school. Like Danny basically does his entire job using Siri. Like, doesn't have a computer, doesn't type. And I mean, he's like the Siri master. But like, we're a little bit older, like this, you know, Danny and me. But I'd love to know, like, what are the tactics to, you know, improve that kind of operationally, but that's maybe a level below just talking about culture.
No, I actually do think that culture, like the culture you build does impact that's some of that stuff. Like I would say last year we suffered from too many meetings, or I would say not even too many meetings. They were just getting too big. So you had like a lot of people that were going to meetings or bringing other people to meetings just so that they could stay informed. Right. It's like they're not contributing to the actual like outcome of the meeting. They're just there because they want to hear what's going on. And that's where what Sean is talking about, like just record it, have a VA, I mean, like, it's amazing how many meetings don't even have agendas. Like, it shocks me. Like, every time I hear somebody bitch about like there's too many meetings or there's too many people in meetings, I'm like, well, then show me the agenda for the meeting and I'll tell you if you're right or wrong. And if they can't show you an agenda, then yeah, they're like, there's probably that meeting shouldn't happen. Right. Like if it's not a rhythm in the business, like it probably shouldn't exist.
Well, it's kind of like the freeway problem, you know, when they have a city that has congestion with the roads, you know, what do? Well, you make your freeways bigger, you add lanes, and you know what happens when you do that? You have the same amount of traffic congestion, that the traffic just flexes up to fill, you know, and organizations can be that way, that like people are going to find ways to fill their time, you know, like especially if you're in a job, like you're going to try and find time to fill it. And so some of that is creating an environment where people are able to find, you know, really productively invest their time. Shopify did something. We are not at this level of hawkishness at all, but I do think it's interesting how it's easy to lose sight of how much a meeting is costing. Shopify added something where on every meeting on their Google Calendar, it actually shows, here's the total cost of this meeting. It takes all of the attendees and their comp, and then it looks at the amount of time, and it basically says, this is a $3,500 meeting that's happening. And so I'm trying to figure out how in our culture, how do you combine that, like an awareness of, hey, it's, you know, we get 5-6 people in a room, like we are paying a lot for that conversation, whatever it is, but also balance that with trying to create a culture where there's collaboration and trust. Because that's the other thing. Like, if you go too hardcore on this, then it's like, these aren't, you know, they're people. They're not automatrons or something, where like part of the reason why you want to get people together in meetings is, again, because it gets people on the same page and it gets the information they need, but also because it helps to build trust and they're able to discuss things. They're able to kind of kick ideas back and forth. And I think as a leader, this is one of the fundamental questions, is how do you create an environment where there is an eye towards that stuff and you are being thoughtful, but at the same time, like, you know, like you're accomplishing the other things that need to happen, which is people knowing the other people they're working with and are on the same page and feel like they're pulling the same direction and stuff like that. What do we learn through COVID? Sean's done it. Sean's fully remote. You've done it. Are you guys mostly remote? Matt, almost fully remote?
I think we're mostly in person. Like, we run our own manufacturing for Pila Case. So like, you kind of got to be in person for that.
You got to be. Jason's on mostly in person. Okay. So like, I just think the reality is most businesses, it's really difficult for a long period of time to operate fully remote. And one of the reasons is because even if the information can be exchanged and stuff, the relational piece, it's really hard to get a team that has high trust and works well together when you don't build the relational pieces. Like,
I don't know
There
if
have been
that's generational though, Mike. I feel like the younger you are,
maybe
the easier it is to do that digitally. Like that might just be our age speaking. Like I'm sort of with you and Jason, but like, a lot of my employees, they thrive digitally, right? Like that's their
But do
actual
they
primary
are
space.
they connected to each other? Like, here's my question. Are they connected to each other? Because I think there's a lot of younger people that like that environment. But my
Yeah.
question is, does it make it that much easier for them to take another job opportunity or to get peeled off by a recruiter or to say, you know what, I really didn't like last week. I'm just going to go find another job. I think relational connectedness and stickiness actually matters a lot for retention. And I'm not convinced at all that many of these companies that are fully remote are retaining people very well at all. And nobody's blowing that trumpet on Twitter, like, hey, we've had 25% turnover in the last year. But especially in the tech industry, it's like there's always recruiters out there. If I don't know my coworkers that well, and it's just a different code base, then yeah, you're going to pay me 15% more. Fine, I'll jump over there, and maybe I'll jump back when you offer me 10% more to come back to my old job. But it seems like there's a lot of that going on out there, and maybe this is part of the reason why the prevailing sentiment is that fully remote isn't working in most situations. Although, Sean, like I said, you guys have made it work, so it's obviously not that it can't work. But I do think the relational component is a big part of leading a company well. And when we get too focused on if the times when I'm too hawkish about things and about meetings, it ends up, I feel like, biting me on the other side. So I don't know how to balance that stuff out. Still learning.
I just want to hit the retention piece. I know, Sean, you've got a lot to say on the whole remote thing.
A number of us in the chat have recently implemented Fulfill, and we've always had massive problems understanding our inventory at HexCloud. I don't know why. It's just always been an issue for us. We implemented NetSuite, wasn't good enough for us. We've been on spreadsheets, Google Sheets, etc. for a while, and we are 95% done implementing Fulfill. The inventory piece is totally done. We're working on linking it back into NetSuite right now. We're helping them actually develop new tools within it, so that's going to be better for the next implementation. But yeah, shout out to Fulfill for jumping in on the pod here.
And because I don't know, Mike, I don't know if I agree with you that like remote can't work for a long period of time. Look, I think the thing to remember about retention and like if people leave, people don't quit companies, they quit leaders.
Yeah.
Right. And people quit cultures. So it's not, and I don't think that has to do with remote or in person. I think a great leader can lead remotely, and I think they can do it in person. Right. And there's probably different types. And I think cultures can be built entirely remote or entirely in person or somewhere in between. Like, I think there's a lot of good things being said here. Like, I do think that a lot of this, Sean, especially for this new hire for you, like a lot of it just comes down to the sort of like mission, vision, values. Like the thing that excites me the most, Sean, about what you say half the time is that you're trying to build like the next Yeti. Like if I'm like a Yeti fan, like I want to build the next one of those. I missed that one. Like I would like to go do that. That sounds fucking awesome. Right? I don't even know what that means, but that sounds awesome. Like I love it when you say that.
It's a good tagline, right? I think it's so funny that we're talking about culture and the things that come up are meetings and then, remote versus in person. Because it's just like, oh yeah, that is, that's the
it's rubber meets the road shit. That always comes up.
It's the practicality of culture, like in practice. What I'll say is Ridge would be a worse company if we were in person. We'd be doing less. And I don't know how you would have meetings in person without having everybody there. Like I sent you guys a screenshot in our group chat of like one of the, just like a quarter of one of the summaries of one of our meetings. Right. And it's like, I could attend 0 meetings in a week and know everything that happened because of those summaries. Right. And typically it's a director or VP leading with their direct reports and then asking the questions, getting the answers, like they're held accountable, right? Like my chief merchandising officer, like knows what I want out of wholesale. And every week is like, what are we doing to get there? And then I just get the recap in the summary. So, meetings still happen. I think a ton of meetings happen across teams, but the meetings I don't have to be involved in because I can see what's happening. And I just don't know how
I
you do
think
that
on
in
one
person.
hand, I think on one hand you have to set, like Jason, like listening to you describe your culture, like you used a lot of like emotional words. Like you were talking about fun and playful and not taking it serious. And like we do the same. Like I've got a very serious mission as a company. Like we're trying to create a waste-free future. Like and like the problems we're solving they're serious problems. We tend to attract people who want to solve those problems. Mike, to your point, like they're here because they want to work on this problem set. They want to work on planet stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is an argument to be made here. Like you can go out and build a culture that's like high performance, playful, whatever you describe it to be. And then when the rubber meets the road stuff comes along, like meetings and whatever, I don't know that has on one hand, because culture is top down, each of us can influence how people think about performance, right? Like we are the ones that set pace. We're the ones that set tone. So are your leaders under you. But then on the other hand, if you look bottom up, like more meetings is often just the company digesting more people, right? And if you've done the work culturally and you continue to beat the drum, Jason in particular, you continue to beat this drum of like what gets measured gets done. And like, you've just got to have these like things that people like, I like look at them like one-liners or taglines. Like you got to have these things that stick in people's heads that they know that this is most important to you and to Danny, right? Then as the company digests people, you're going to see a bulging of like, okay, there's too many fucking meetings. But if you continue to like reinforce some of these core principles in the business, the meetings kind of it sorts itself out, right? Like if you're all about performance and you tell people like meetings, like this is how much this costs and you can do things gently, like I think it actually sorts itself out. Like we ebb and flow with this shit. Sometimes we're amazing. Sometimes we're not. Usually when we're not, it's because we've like added a bunch of new people. Those new people are trying to get up to speed. They're trying to figure out how they work with other people. They're trying to build trust. Like it's all the human shit.
My big soapbox here is to just say, I think a lot of this comes back to the values of your organization. It's a disaster when you have an organization where there's not clarity on values. You have people in the organization that are really, really care about excellence, and they're having to work with people who don't. That's a disaster. So you have to have clarity on values, and values are really about trade-offs. They're really about what are you willing to make trade-offs and sacrifices for, and that you want consistency and you want clarity. And when you have that, and this is come up time and time again on this, like all four of us, I think, run different cultures, and it works, and that's fine. Like there's not a right way to do culture, except that if your culture is just a hot mess where there's not consistency, like in terms of values, then it's not going to go well, right? Like it cannot be that different departments have different values or different people are held to different standards. And then are you willing to actually put your money where your mouth is and make sacrifices for those values? And if you are, then it can work. Like, and we can get hung up on tactics. You know, remote versus in person is a tactic. The way that you run meetings is a tactic, but culture is really more about belonging and purpose. And like you said it, Matt, like if I was recruiting to your company, I'm sure you do this. It's like, hey, we are all about transforming the future of, the planet.
Every job posting. Every
Absolutely.
Job posting starts with that.
And you're able to attract people that I couldn't probably, I don't know. I mean, my company maybe could, but like, that maybe Jason couldn't, because like you are uniquely making a difference and an impact in that way. And so I think that's probably, as we get to the end of this, like my big thing is that I've just learned you have to, from the top down, you have to say, this is what we are about and this is what we value. And you have to be able to weed out anything that runs counter to that, and then make sure that it's consistent with your actions and with the way that your company's running. If you do that, there's a lot of different ways that you can make this work and do it effectively.
You want to know how you know a company has real values? There's a simple test. They fired people over it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So I want to talk about retention. I have 2 minutes, guys. So for the last 2 minutes, Ridge hasn't had somebody quit in 2 years. I mean,
that's not good.
Yeah, yeah, a really long time. So we tend to fire about, I don't know, between 2 and 5 people a quarter, right? So like we bump out low performers all the time, but we've totally talked about it. Like, oh yeah, it's bad that nobody's quit. The job's either too easy or too good or something, right? Like we're not challenging these people if they're actually not quitting. But I mean, also, it's like, yeah, it's great. It's a core team that sticks together, right? We've only ever added more people. Headcount's only ever gone up. So, how many people have quit in the past 12
Very
months in your
few.
guys' business?
Very, very
Do you guys
few.
have a number?
We have the same thing.
Very few.
People want to be a part of a winner.
Very, very few. And you know what's funny? It is, yeah, it's actually the people that like are kind of cultural, like they're a fit, but not the perfect fit. Right.
Yeah.
And they're not like, they like the mission, but that's not like they're not really here for that. But yeah, very few.
I think we have one person that left to go into nonprofit work. They went to work for their church, but among our office staff, I think it's 0 other than that.
Yeah, which is amazing, right? I think, you know, we tend to, like, you know, at some point in a quarter, you know, fire people who we just don't think are a fit, and we really try to be as human as possible. Be like, man, you are not working out. Here's severance. I wish you the best. Will be a reference or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we're very sticky org, and I think all of us kind of run a pretty sticky org. Besides that, all right, guys, I got to jump. I think you guys are sticking around. Thank you, Northbeam. Thank you, Sandlane. Thank you, Fulfill. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
See you,
We've
man.
got a
See you,
panzerism
Sean.
related to culture that we can hit real quick.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. I want to hear this one.
Work expands to fill the time allotted. Okay. And it's kind of related to what's called Parkinson's law. But basically, it's like if you wait until the last minute, it only takes 1 minute to do it, right? Like if you have to. And so
yeah. You want something done, give it to a busy person.
Like, you know, decisions, I mean, we talked about, like, decisions need to get made. At some point, you just like, the clock has run out. We've got to stop. We've got to move on. I remember when my old boss, Ken, in our investment banking firm, I was the COO. He was the founder, and we had, you know, he was 10, 15 years older than me, great mentor, incredible guy. We do the SIM, right? The book for the deal, Matt, and he would obsess over these things, and he would just rewrite it, and he would start in one place and take it another, and then he'd go back to where it started, and it's drive me fucking crazy. But eventually he would be like, all right, time is up. I have to stop. I wish it would have happened sooner, you know, but it was always like, time is up, got to stop. And I think you need to really put a clock on everything. Otherwise, work expands to fill the time allotted. I went and said, there's no more 60-minute default meetings when you put a meeting on a calendar. No way. 30 minutes. We have one company-wide meeting every Wednesday. And we let that one go about an hour and 15, and we have about 25 people. It's like department heads and other special folks. And we just have it, that one, we let it go an hour 15, but you got to make decisions. You just got to move. And, I've got like 3 or 4 initiatives, and talked about being patient on them and letting them go for 6 months if you had to. But there's other things. It's like, you can just see what's going on here. You can just see that we just keep screwing around. And the only way to stop that is to reduce the time allotted. Thoughts on that, guys?
Dude, there's 2 powerful questions that everybody needs to use repeatedly in their business on this. Okay. The first is, how will I know? And the second is, by when? Because if you're not communicating the by when, right, then like shit's just going to linger. And everything should have a deadline, like everything. Even if it's like directionally correct, it's like, I think it's going to be Q4 of 2024. Like if you're in like long product development cycles, it's still a by when.
Yeah. When I've been in meetings where they're like strategic planning meetings where they're longer, like say 2, 3, 4 hours, but we've got to hit several topics. It's incredibly helpful to be like, okay, we're going to talk about this topic for this long. We're going to set a timer, and then we're going to be done. it's the same principle that like we need boundaries because it helps bring us to the point of the decision. I also think that the reality is it's kind of like when you're taking a test, like they've done research that when you take a test, that your first intuition is almost always better than a decision that you would come to through thinking on
Malcolm
it.
Gladwell wrote a book on this. What was it called?
Yeah.
Blink, right? Like it's such
Right.
it's the thing.
Right. So it's like, to your point, Jason, we're trying to build this habit of having a bias to action. And that really requires that we create some boundaries when it comes to time, right? That because there's always a reason why I could say, if I had a little bit more information, if I had a little bit more time, if I had a little bit more whatever. And the reality is actually moving is so much more powerful than the little bit of incremental information that you might gather through waiting or whatever usually. And so I think that where I struggle is finding the exact balance between those two things. You know, I can try and I'm a quick processor. And so I can try and go too fast sometimes for people on my team where I'll say, hey, let's make a decision in 20 minutes on this. And everybody's like, whoa, okay, this is
But your
pretty big.
decision
Like,
could be
let's talk about
just
this
as
for a little
bad
bit. So I think that
if
that's
you take 20 days versus 20 minutes. It could be just as bad.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So maybe it's probably like you're trying to figure out what's an appropriate amount of time, and then we're going to hold ourselves to it. And we're going to do the best we can. We're going to move forward. But I totally agree with that, Jason. And I've seen that, organizationally, that there are things when I don't really set hard deadlines that they can just linger. And it's like, how is this thing still out there? Well, how are we still talking about this? I do think also, like, in our culture, we have a real high emphasis on collaboration, which is like we want to hear everybody's voice. And as much as we can, we want to get everybody on the same page. But you just can't always do that. And that's one of the reasons why conversations will just drift on forever is that, 15% of the room is just not aligned or on board yet. And I think that that's part of the role of the leader is to say, hey, we're going to create this constraint and we're going to discuss it to that point. But then we're going to make a decision. We're going to move forward. And, everybody who is not necessarily at that place or aligned with that, they're going to say, okay, we've talked about it. I'm going to choose to kind of be all in and align with this now because we've put time towards it. Because if you say, hey, I went to this leadership thing when I was in high school that they do for the state of Oklahoma, and they broke you into groups. So it was all these leaders from high schools, and they broke you into groups, and they gave you a task. It was a series of kind of not important tasks. It was like pretend that you're a business and what do you sell and what's your logo and all this stuff. But they said every decision has to be made by consensus or you can't make the decision. And nothing got done. It was amazing. Everything bogged down. And it taught me a really important principle that ties in with this, that it's like, if you allow yourself to say, hey, I've got to get everybody on board, or I've got to have every I dotted and every T crossed before we can move forward, then things just drag forever. So it's a good thought,
Yeah.
Jason.
Yeah, that's great, man. Really great. All right.